Thank you, Dr. Sameer, for joining us the second time. I think, increasing number of cases all across the country, there's a general sense of fear and restlessness, in all of us. As a small initiative, Team Elda wants to have our women, their families, and everybody else, get at least few of their questions answered by an expert like you. Quickly introducing you in a few words. We've had the privilege of speaking to you in the past too. We understand and we've been inspired by the last session that you gave us. You've treated many patients in the last year, and would love to sort of hear your experience very briefly on the last year COVID situation, and then we can move on to the question and answer session. Over to you, Dr. Sameer.
Good afternoon, Team Elda. Thank you. Honor again to be part of one of your sessions. I hope everyone is hale and hearty and at least recovered well, and none of them have lost anyone. Definitely from where we started off last year, say in Feb, this time the second wave has been extremely lethal, and unfortunately, probably we thought the worst was over back in December, but it's come with a vengeance, and we need to be way more careful this time around. And the double variant, unfortunately, that is right now rampant in India, that is causing a lot more damage than what it used to back when we initially dealt with it. Yes, the good part is we do have certain more arsenals with us. We are not completely unknown of what we are dealing with right now. We have more research, we have more data, and we have certain medications and drugs. And now, of course, with the use of vaccines and the efficacy associated with it, we're getting some decent responses, and definitely there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Okay, so I'm ready to answer all the questions.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Sameer. What I will do is we already have a bunch of questions with us. Let me go over those questions one by one, get your answers, and then we'll open up the forum for all the women here to ask you the questions directly. Ladies, please feel free to ask any questions that you have. Personally, I have reached out to doctor for everything that I needed to know about COVID. And when I tested positive last month, he was my primary source of contact, not just for me, but for my entire family. So please go ahead and ask any questions that you might have. Dr. Sameer, so I will go with my first question that we have today. How much should one wait for the second dose of Covaxin?
All right. So if you've taken the first dose of Covaxin, you can wait until 4 to 6 weeks for the second dose to come in. Of course, in the midst, if you do get infected, which is a possibility, as high as say around 30% chances after the first dose to still get an infection, then you need to wait for at least 4 weeks more before you take your second dose. So ideally, if you are in an ideal position where you don't have symptoms and you've not been exposed, then it is 4 to 6 weeks as far as Covaxin goes. Because we do not have further data on Covaxin on the research where there is an increased gap between the two doses and what are the longevity of the immunogenic response to that. So currently, as far as ICMR and the Bharat Biotech guidelines, it's 4 to 6 weeks is what the gap should be between the two doses.
Understood. Thank you so much. Next question is about how do people with diabetes basically, protect themselves from COVID? I mean, what are the precautions that they need to take?
From a diabetic perspective, the cardinal rules remain the same. As far as the COVID-19 appropriate behavior is what is called, which is the three essentials. One being the mask, second being frequent sanitizations, especially when you are going out of your house, going in unknown areas, touching unknown surfaces. You all need to frequently sanitize your hands for good 60 to 90 seconds. Okay. Third, social distancing. Of course, do not go in crowded areas. Try and avoid all of that. Maintain a distance of at least 2 meters, because most of these droplets and the rest of the airway transmission is via anyone coming less than 1 meter distance. That is the basic rule. Apart from what specific to diabetes individuals, they are supposed to be more atherogenic in the sense they have a tendency to develop more clots, and they have a tendency to get secondary infections. So be as clean as possible at home. Make sure your sugars are under absolute control. The control, when I meant, it should be ranging around 150, not more than that. The higher limit you can take is 180. All your parameters, fasting as well as postprandial, should be registering less than 180 milligram per deciliter. Hydrate yourself very well. I've seen most people landing up with the number of issues because they are not hydrating themselves, especially the diabetic, because they have an accelerated form of what we call as atherosclerosis, और हम जिसे बोलते हैं हमारे वेसल्स में धीरे धीरे क्लॉट बनता है. Okay, this is an aging process. This is much more accelerated in cases of diabetes individuals, so they need to hydrate themselves extremely well. And these are the people who need to be very very clean and absolutely maintaining such sanitization so that they do not they do not land up in any form of a secondary infection, because these are the people who will not come up with a very classical symptoms. Okay, all the symptoms that we call fever, the chest pain, and all the red flag signs are usually typically seen more in non-diabetic. Diabetics will have a silent sort of a presentation. So minor test of sign should not be ignored as a regular thing. You need to contact your physician as soon as possible. Okay, for your home aspect, for a daily routine, just control your sugars, maintain good hydration, maintain COVID-19 appropriate behavior, and lastly, stay away from anything unknown or anyone unknown for that matter. That's about it.
Got it. Thank you. I think this came up as a question from many people, because generally folks with comorbidities, diabetes, or any other heart-related issues, I think we're a little bit more nervous about them than the others. But thank you. I think this helps a lot. Dr. Sameer, I think the next question has come around about people who are suffering from COVID. How do they treat themselves at home? And if you can also share some more insights, inputs about the kind of medication that these women or men might need to take, I think that'd be super helpful.
Firstly, it's very recent that in the advent of this pandemic, the government has allowed home isolation. Certain criteria to home isolation. When you decide to take this route as a home isolation and self quarantine, or rather treating yourself, that is something you need to always be in touch with your physician first. Let them help you categorize firstly whether are you a high risk patient or no, and can you be eligible for home isolation in the first place. Secondly, the home isolation in itself requires very very minimal support, which is primarily antihistaminics, what we call for basic cough and rhinitis and sore throat. There are anti-inflammatory medications like Dolo 650, then basic steam and betadine gargles along with good hydration. 80% of the people they suffice in this. Usually, most of them they recover very nicely in next 5 to 7 days time. You got to give your body time enough to counter this virus and infection. And two aspects you need to understand: infection is one part. The next stage is the disease. So physician helps you distinguish when they remain in constant touch with you while you are under home isolation. What is the point where you are now showing sign of COVID-19 disease has caused end organ damages, like lung infection has happened, or there is some other aspects. Sometimes, especially in comorbidity individuals, they might have chest pain, they might have myocarditis, they might have a kidney superadded thromboembolic phenomena, they might have a stroke. So all these are aspects which are very, very sensitive, and these are the aspects only a physician who is COVID-19 trained can understand and can catch very early signs. So you cannot treat yourself at home alone, period. You need to remain in touch with the physician on a regular basis. Make sure you have all the monitoring equipments required on a daily basis, like a pulse oximeter, which will show you a pulse as well as the oxygen. There are plenty of videos available to guide you how to use a pulse oximeter and which reading is ideal. When those plethysmographs are very regular for at least 30 seconds, where the graph variability is not there, that is the point where you actually consider your exact SpO2 levels. Rest, monitoring of the blood pressure, monitoring of the sugars, and the rest of the comorbidities is very important. Along with that, there are what is called as acute phase reactants like ESR, CRP. So, what we call as a hyperinflammatory state is what usually people have after COVID-19 infection. So, people who are prone to this, they need to keep monitoring, because many a times, even post COVID, they seem to land up in a lot of complications if they've not monitored themselves well. So home isolation is definitely good when you have very mild or asymptomatic totally. That is the only time. And also if you don't belong to a high risk category individual, high risk when I mean above 60 with comorbidities are high risk individuals. So these are the people whom I advise home isolation, and with a very, very critical monitoring on a daily basis and update. And if your physician is not willing to give that kind of a time and touch with you while you are home isolated per se, please change the physician or find someone else. You need to be in constant touch with someone who can truly give that time and monitoring with you. Okay, not to scare you, definitely for high risk as well as people who need to isolate at home, even if they consider it's mild, they need to be monitored very, very strictly. And these are the guidelines that have been lived well by the government of India as well as ICMR. They need to be checked at least 5 times before their entire isolation period is over. So that is almost every alternate day. Okay, that is the basic minimum that is required from your physician. And if he's not able to give that, please change the physician. So yeah, so this is what would be required as far as home isolation is concerned. And medications and all, it's very general. You usually do not require any antibiotics, which is quite rampant in use these days, and it's very unnecessary. Antibiotics do not protect against COVID. It's supposed to be only for secondary infections, and that is also if you have any signs of it. So that is exactly where you don't have to take any antibiotics. I repeat, no antibiotics are required, just basic antihistaminics, which will cater to your cold and flu-like symptoms. Basic antipyretics and anti-inflammatory like Dolo 650 and Crocin, which is very readily available over the counter. Maintain good nutrition, maintain good hydration, steam inhalation, betadine gargles. These are the only things that are required when you are isolated at home. And make sure that your saturation remains above 94%. That is the cutoff for anyone who is not having a predisposing lung disease. So from your baseline, it should not go down by 3. 3 is the parameter with which we take count. 6-minute walk test is something that I usually ask my patients to do on a very regular basis, on an everyday protocol, and ask them to send me the pre and the post walk SpO2 levels. So that is what exactly I ask them to do, because this gives us a very early sign that your lungs are getting involved, and you are progressing from a very mild to moderate disease, and you need an urgent intervention and optimization on your treatment or SOS admission as well. So 6-minute walk test is something that is now very easily seen, and the YouTube may videos are there. You just measure your baseline SpO2 while at rest. You have a small walk of 6 minutes in your own room. You don't have to sprint around or rather exert much. You just have a normal routine walk, a garden walk for 6 minutes. Post that, check again. If there is a drop of more than 3, you need to really be seriously monitored and need to be in immediate touch with your physician. So these are the absolute guidelines that I would want to say. If there's any other question on this, I can answer them.
Sure, sure. No, I think this is great. We'll also be sharing a recorded version of this, doctor, to the rest of the team who are not there. But like you said, the 6-minute walk test, no need to take antibiotics, making sure that the physician is around to do that care that you need. So I think all these points are extremely valuable for the women and their families, of course. Doctor, one more thing that's basically come up is most of us are getting vaccinated, or we've sort of tested positive in the past. So the question was that for people who've been vaccinated or have tested positive in the past, what is the probability that they can be carriers of COVID, or they can get infected again? I think that's a question that's come from a couple of our women. Please go ahead and answer them.
So it's a very good question, actually. So this is something that even we as doctors are very unsure of as to once vaccinated, can we be carriers? But early data currently that are done, especially the highest amount of research data has been done in US. They say it is a likely possibility, though the overall percentage is less, but there is still likely possibility that they can be carriers, especially when you have a very close contact with someone. You may pass on, because sometimes while the body is there are always open air passages that are there. So these are the areas where you cannot help but keep cleaning all the time is not a possibility, and you might have gone to a big market or somewhere where you have work and come back, and you might be resistant to it. That is exactly where we say the mucosal immunity is not there as such. So in all logic, you can well be one of the carriers and give it over to someone. But still, there are a number of factors required. The closeness is required. That kind of a viral load needs to be unleashed on that person, and that may lead to an infection. Obviously, the chances are low, but it cannot be completely ruled out. It is not a possibility at all. So that cannot be ruled out, and no one has till now. And that is exactly why there are certain researchers who are right now building vaccines to locally infuse intranasal sprays are the future currently, which will block the entry of the virus itself where it starts. So preventing the disease in itself can be blocked. So Bharat Biotech, Pfizer, all of them are investing heavily on this, and hopefully by the end of this year, we should have an intranasal spray. They are already conducting phase 2 trials on this. Hopefully, we'll hear something good on that. Until then, you got to be absolutely, COVID-19 appropriate behavior is the way to go for at least for a year. That's the only way to ensure that you're not a carrier, even after vaccination.
Sure. So always be careful. Better, I think nothing can shield us or protect us completely. And I think we should all be on our guard always, irrespective of the vaccine, as well as, having a...
Vaccinated or not vaccinated, you got to completely be in a COVID-19 appropriate behavior.
Sure, sure. Doctor, so I think these were majority of the questions that came up. There was a specific question related to one particular woman, who got operated last year and before the lockdown, had a muscle tear. I think you know the concern that she's going through in terms of the pain and so on. Would you be able to comment on it right now, or should we could even take this question offline? But I'll just read it out to you. She's a 50-year-old woman, who got Covishield vaccine on 29th of March, had fever, terrible body ache for 3 days, and couldn't get up from bed. On the third day, she noticed a lump at the injection point. It was red and swollen and was paining a lot. She consulted her physician, and who was an abscess prescribed an antibiotic Augmentin 650 for 10 days. If she said if it doesn't reduce, then she might have to go through surgery. She also met a surgeon who asked her to take antibiotics for the next 5 days. So she says that the lump has reduced, but she wanted to know why the abscess was formed, and she wants to know that despite whatever happened, is the vaccine effective? What are the side effects of vaccine or negligence on the part of the nurse or the administrator, the one who was administering the injection? So I think that's her broad question in terms of, her
Okay, so I
vaccination.
take it she had what we call as an abscess. Now, this injection abscess is something which is a known side effect for any, especially intramuscular injection. The cause basically is that usually there is some kind of a contamination that has happened while injecting her, and that probably has, of course, subcutaneous tissue when it is delivered also not in the intramuscular and probably a site above it, what we call a subcutaneous. Many a time that is a breeding ground for that, and that leads to what we call as abscess. Abscess is basically full of dead organisms there, multiplying and dying there, and it creates a pool of abscess. A pus is formed in the local area, and that becomes extremely painful. So unfortunate that the women had to actually go through this, you know, clinical state. But nevertheless, these vaccines, they come in multi-dose vials, So usually the same vial is utilized for almost 10 of them, and in some cases 5 of them. So what happens is intermediate steps that are needed every time that you use, you are supposed to, maintain that sanitization. The spirit needs to be again applied to the opening where we puncture basically to collect the vaccine, and there has to be a contact time for it. Many times what happens is they do it in such hurry that spirit and all, it requires 30-40 seconds of contact time to actually get sterilized. Following that, are they using disposable syringe? I'm sure they must be using disposable syringe, but it is probably the cap which probably got infected, and that is exactly why this has happened. Also, if the patient has some precondition like a diabetes and all, they are more prone to such infections, as I mentioned earlier as well. They are very much prone for such infections. So yeah, unfortunately, since the lady has undergone this mess, so there might be a possibility she might require incision drainage, and I'm happy if she's avoided that and she's recovered well from it. As far as immunogenicity is concerned of the vaccine that she's taken, I think it's pretty much there. Considering she had 3 to 4 days of fever and everything, that is usually the adverse side effects that happen. Especially with Covishield, you have more pyrogenic reactions like headache, like fever, having extreme body ache and all. So I believe that is that has happened, and she's pretty much well vaccinated. She shouldn't worry about that. Nevertheless, if there is still a doubt in the mind, then she can always take an antibody test. Considering she did it on 29th of March, then I think she can confirm it by doing an antibody test, SARS-CoV-2 antibody test, after a week or so. So say after 15, that will be ideal. So she can confirm with that, and accordingly she'll be more relieved knowing that her antibodies have come in and the vaccine is working. But yeah, in my view, I think I don't have much doubt that the vaccine has worked. So not worry about that. But yes, the next time when she goes, I would suggest please use the other hand, not this one, and please make a request to your own vaccinator and tell them the history that you've had an injection abscess, so that the vaccinator will be extremely cautious the next time. Okay. And as far as negligence goes, I wouldn't want to comment. I don't know the details where and how she took it and in what manner. But nevertheless, let's move on from that. The next time you need to really be very careful. Okay.
Sure. Thank you, Doctor. I think I'll just open up the forum for the women in the group to ask their questions. Ladies, please feel free to either type in the chat box or unmute yourself and ask your questions. I'm sure Dr. Sameer has all the answers and would be more than happy to answer our questions. Please go ahead, lady. The question that has come up is, do we need to take favipiravir upon testing positive? Also, do we need to do an HRCT test?
Okay, good question. See, favipiravir is a known antiviral drug, and it is extremely useful in the first viral replication phase, which lasts say, around 7 to 9 days initially in the illness. So what I would suggest is don't time it for the test, because many people are being tested much later. Already the symptoms have happened 5 7 days. Next they start testing themselves. So favipiravir is something that I would suggest only your physician, under physician guidance, you got to take favipiravir. For any asymptomatic of mild cases, you really don't require favipiravir. Use it judiciously only and only when you feel that it's mild to moderate. That is the category where we utilize favipiravir. And second part of the question was, I'm sorry, whether you need to do an HRCT test. The HRCT test is a twin-edged sword. I wouldn't recommend, and neither the radiology departments recommend HRCT as a routine. It is one HRCT is equivalent 300 to 400 X-rays. Okay, so if you are not requiring, it's not a compulsion. Mild cases, asymptomatic cases, they don't need to go ahead with any HRCT whatsoever. And it's no form of diagnosis. The gold standard remains RT-PCR only. Nothing else is to be utilized. Okay. So HRCT test is only for those cases who show a lung involvement and a disease. When the infection has progressed to a disease, that is the only time. So I would suggest right from moderate state is when you need to take an HRCT test. Otherwise, it's just not necessary.
Got it. Thank you. Manisha, if you have any further questions, please let us know. Others, any questions that you may have, please share it on the forum.
One more question from Tanvi.
Yeah, please
Can
go ahead.
we take vaccine in pregnancy? Tanvi, unfortunately, the doctor community is definitely pitching for this, but we don't have the clearances as far as the Ministry of Health Affairs. So currently, ICMR and Ministry of Health Affairs have prohibited the use, especially in lactating mothers and pregnant ladies. So currently, you should not be using, considering there are not so much data and research that is still available out there for Covaxin and Covishield use in pregnancy. The only vaccine which has been given the clearance, Pfizer vaccine. Okay, the mRNA vaccine which US has, we still don't have available in India. And currently, I think Foxy and all the platforms, they all are recommending, that government give go ahead to the pregnant ladies to go ahead with vaccination. Rightly so, and hopefully we'll be hearing an official permission from the government of India very soon. But until then, I'm sorry, you'll have to just remain calm and take all the precautions back home. No vaccine for you at present.
Thank you. Any other questions, doctor, that you see on your chat? Any else? If you have any questions, we will keep the conversation on for the next 5 minutes. Please feel free to ask your questions now. I think if there are no other questions, we will conclude the session. So doctor, thank you so much for your time. I mean, as always, it's an honor to sort of speak with you, and there's a very, very visible difference in my calm and peace of mind before the session and after the session. So thank you once again. I can speak for the team. I think it's always been a pleasure listening to all the stuff that you've said. We will stay in touch and hopefully have another session very soon with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks everyone else for also attending. Thank you.